Welcome to the Sunrise Project podcast. It is a joy to have you join us, and I gotta say, it is a joy to be here. We're gonna dive right into introductions, and then we'll tell you what we're gonna do today. But I am Gabby Johnson, and you can find me out and about in our community of Grants Pass. Let's see, I'm a homeschool mama, and I attend church at Pursuit Nazarene. And I really love community organizing with Grants Pass Remembrance, so I get to be here and there and all about, which has been really fun.
My name is Dorothy, and I'm semi-retired, but I still teach part-time at the local community college in Grants Pass. And I love riding public transportation, so you'll see me a lot on the number 10 bus riding around town.
I'm Constance Palaya. I am usually in the library at Fruitdale Elementary School is my day job, and I own a little motel on the banks of the Rogue River. So I spend a lot of time in each.
My name is Sylvia. I was almost born, but mostly raised here, and I went to the local public schools, so I'm very involved in the community. I love Grants Pass Remembrance, and I'm a proud member of the Unitarian Universalists of Grants Pass.
My name is Taylor Stewart, and I'm the executive director of the Oregon Remembrance Project. I help communities with truth and reconciliation projects around repairing historical injustice. And I live in Portland, Oregon, but I meet regularly with Grants Pass Remembrance via Zoom, and when we have events, you will find me in town.
So as you've caught on, our common denominator here is Grants Pass Remembrance, and we're going to tell you a little bit of backstory on Grants Pass Remembrance, and then we're going to get into the spirit of our work and how we do it. So our backstory is actually at an MLK gathering in 2020. That was kind of where it sparked, but the story goes back to when I first moved into town. I had been here for just a bit and heard the rumor of the curfew sign that used to be on the Caveman Bridge, and I wanted to hear more about it because I wanted to know what is this? What do you mean? There was a curfew sign for Black Americans. And they couldn't tell me anything else. And my brother is biracial and is going to be coming into town to visit us in a month. And boy, I wanted to know that he would feel welcomed, that this could be as much his home as I was wanting to make it mine. And that was my start. I started asking people. I had never heard of the term Sundown Town. And as I got more into the story and understanding what that meant, I started to really want to talk about it with my neighbors and what does this mean for us today? And realized slowly as I was really inspired by Brian Stevenson. That's someone that Taylor Stewart's also, that's one of our heroes. He has a quote that says, truth and reconciliation is sequential. You have to know the truth before you can reconcile. And so that was when I went to that MLK gathering and realized I really want to talk about this. And we're not yet really talking about it. And I was inspired by that time there and that time together and wanted to dig in more. And so I produced a booklet with a couple other people and on our history of racism in Grants Pass and in Oregon, because we have a history in our whole state. And I sent a thank you letter to Brian Stevenson's organization, and they said, hey, there's somebody else out in Oregon doing work. You should connect. And so Taylor and I connected and began meeting on Zoom. And I think we'd been meeting maybe for almost a year. I'm not quite sure. For Taylor and I, we met for a while, and then he came into town, and we kind of used that as a moment of, hey, do we want to do something here? And that was how we all got connected. So we have now been working together for a couple of years, and it's just been a joy to get to work together. And of course, the we that you see here is only a portion of what Grants Pass Remembrance is, but these are some of the really close caretakers. We have a coalition of people that are all over our community, some involved every month, and some that pop in here and there, and some that cheer us along from the sidelines. And there's all different kinds of ways to be a part of this work, but this is a pretty special group that we've got up here right now. Yeah. Taylor, did you want to add anything in that story?
Yeah, I feel very honored to be able to do this work with folks like yourselves who want to make a positive impact in their community, and especially want to change the ending to stories of historical injustice. This is a rather unique work to be doing, and I feel privileged to do it with folks like yourselves. This is an unconventional spirit with which we actually do this work. I have the idea that rather than tell a community who they're not, tell them who they can be, and then show them the steps to becoming that community, allowing them to play an active role in their own journey. There's a spirit of positivity and gentleness that's required to invite people into this work. The greatest obstacle I've experienced so far is that of fear. Fear for what it means to unearth these stories of historical injustice. And I think it's important for those who are doing this work to have sympathy for that feeling. I myself remember what it was like to learn these stories about the United States and Oregon and feel powerless. But what I've learned through this work across Oregon and with this group is that we in fact do have power. We have power over the ending to these stories of historical injustice. And so we want to share with more people about how there's the work itself, but then there's the spirit behind it, which requires a gentleness and a patience to be invitational to all. That we can't create this vision of a sunrise community if we only partner with like-minded individuals. We'll just be preaching to the choir if we only get together with people who are like us. That in order to actually create real transformative change in a community, we have to build cross-cultural partnerships. And that's something that I've really appreciated about Grants Pass Remembrance.
One of my favorite things about that is there's such a richness and depth that comes when we're all at the table, and our differences and our uniqueness, it just excites me to get to. It's not just that it's effective or that it's if we really want to grow that we can do this thing. It's that it's good and it's fun, and there's so much that I get to learn from the people that are different than me, that if I didn't sit down and tell myself, no, I'm going to listen longer and I'm going to be with you because I know that's really important, that like I get so surprised by the pieces that I find and the things that I learn, and like, I didn't expect that ending, but how cool it's a really exciting one. Yeah. Dorothy, do you want to share? This is a piece that catches you as well.
It is. I feel very passionate about the concept of keeping a seat at the table for everyone. That when we say we are Grants Pass, we means all of us. It means the people who think like me. It means the people who don't think like me. It means the people in my circle and people far outside of my circle. It means people that I care about and love and like very much, and people that I don't like much yet. and to really keep open that possibility that every person that I might consider an obstacle or a problem is really a kind of a partner in this work, waiting to feel comfortable enough with me to open up and be human with me. And so that piece of it is a very big piece for me.
I liked how you said that bit about open up and be human with me. And there is so much work that we individually have to do before we can even begin to expect another person to release into that comfort. Yeah.
I think that doing the work the way that we do with the community, like Taylor was alluding to, and Gabby, there's some guilt and shame in even the truth of our history, and being able to be gentle and non-judgmental about teaching, acknowledging that truth and reconciling it really is just a great catalyst for people. And I think that they understand our gentleness and Gabby's incredible curiosity. She wants to hear what people feel, and that's been a wonderful part of this work too.
Boy, I could talk about Gabby's curiosity, absolutely. When I first got started with this work, I'll be honest, I was kind of pessimistic. I felt like you two were so positive about the change that we could see in Grants Pass, and in my super long time on the earth in Grants Pass, I hadn't seen a lot of that. You know, I had a lot of negative experiences in high school and in the community with just awful seeing racism and experiencing being outcast for trying to have a bit more of a humanitarian respect in my life. And so to be a part of this work with you two and Gabby going out and making such a huge, diverse coalition, I didn't think you could do it. And boy, was I wrong. So it is so uplifting, and what a lovely group we have. And like Dorothy said, there might be people that we don't like yet, and that's okay. They're part of our community, and so they're part of our work.
Speaking to that hope, as Gabby mentioned earlier, our mutual hero in life is a man named Brian Stevenson, and one of his quotes is that hope is our superpower. And so I've tried to develop what does it mean to have unrelenting hope in this work, which I think requires us to have faith that even when we run into obstacles, that we just need to find a different way around. That just because we hit that wall doesn't mean that we, can't get around. One thing that I've learned in the fundraising world, there's the idea that if you don't make the ask, you are saying no for them. And so we tried to bring that same spirit to inviting people into this work that, it doesn't matter if we saw the bumper stickers on their car as we walked past. We still make that ask, because if we don't make that ask, it's on us that they're not with us. And so I think that that's something that I've learned to try and practice when it comes to holding space for people at this table that we call a community.
That brings to mind, and I love you segued it so lovely, Taylor. The holding space leads us into the reality of holding tension within ourselves. Now, in my own marriage, my husband has a different way that he approaches things, and there are things that if I only listen to the first bit of what he's saying, I'm tense, and I'm either ready to go or I'm ready to talk over him. But if I slow down and listen longer, I've had so many moments of being, oh, I hear what you're saying now, and that's different than I would have said it. But I'm really learning in the process how I can say it differently. And you've seen some angle of this. It's a little bit like that, the mice and the elephant, and you have the big elephant and the blind mice that are like, I feel this, and it feels like, no, it's not that. It's this over here. It's that over there. But like, we need all of our different places, and we're gonna sound like we're talking about something totally different for a bit. But if we listen longer, we're going to learn some other unique dimension of our community, or even of this this wound of racism that is in our community that we're still learning how to heal and really heal well, not just kind of let it fester or be, but to really take it and care over it. So that's that holding tension. I think I first learned about it in my marriage. and really sitting in that and knowing I know I love you and I know I respect you, and so maybe just knowing that, like, it helps me hang on long enough, and that's helped me and my neighbors, that I might not be so committed naturally to saying, no, I know I love you, I know I respect you, I'm going to hang on long enough to figure out what you're saying and to really understand it. That's meant a lot.
You know, speaking of marriage, we know how to do a lot of these interpersonal things on a one-on-one basis that we just need to learn how to practice on a communal level. I myself have learned a lot since being married for 6 months. I'd say I'm an expert. One thing so I've developed my own series of organizing strategies, and the one that I've most recently added is called the spouse, where I've learned that, you know, in marriage, you help your spouse become the best version of themselves, not out of spite and dissatisfaction with who they are, but out of love. Love that you know that is within them, and you're just trying to help bring it out. And I think that is a lot of what we try to do on a communal level, that we are trying to make a change in Grants Pass because we're trying to help bring out its best version of itself. And that we can't make this change if we're doing it out of spite or negative frustration. But there has to be some element of love and positivity that will actually help bring out those values that we know are hidden inside.
A fun bit to that too is that when you're married, you actually don't know what that best version of themselves is going to look like. Like you're in for the journey of it, and that's very much true with this work. Is that it's been fun to find out, like, well, what does it look like for Grants Pass to heal, and what does it look like for Grants Pass to have a Martin Luther King Jr. gathering? Like, it's going to be different here than it's going to be in another community. So it's been fun to learn about Grants Pass through each other and to find out, well, what is our best version, and what does that healed version look like?
You know, Sylvie and I have talked off camera about her own experience searching and finding that love for her community that I think folks would appreciate hearing.
Yes, it has been difficult, and I've been writing essays recently for my own life, and I keep writing. For 22 years, I've been resigned to the fact that Grants Pass is a hateful place. And I hadn't realized how deeply I really did feel like that for a long time, that, boy, we've done some awful things, we continue to do some awful things, and yet I love so many people here. You know, I feel this community love in so many different spaces, and having to reconcile those two different feelings has been really difficult. But really, Grants Pass Remembrance is what has enabled me to get rid of that resignation and embrace some of your positivity. Gabby, it's definitely seeped into my more pessimistic nature. But really, the only way that we can is by engaging everybody. And I think a great example of that is our recent community presentations. We have been speaking to people in service clubs, right? And they don't have political affiliations. They're not necessarily in one religion or another. They are a diverse group of people who really care about Grants Pass, you know. So many events, the Duck Derby, the Winterfest, the Bear Hotel, these are things that people love about Grants Pass, and the people that put them on obviously love Grants Pass. So to be able to share our work with them and the responses that we've gotten have been really heartening for me as well. I think even, like you said, Taylor, about loving your spouse, which I'm glad that you do, that's the common denominator. That's what we hear every single time is, yes, I love Grants Pass. Even if it's not, yes, I want to reconcile our history. I love Grants Pass, and that's where we can start.
I wanted to ask you to talk, actually.
I'll just say too that in those community presentations, one thing that I have enjoyed seeing, we're facing an audience and we get to see their faces throughout our presentation. And most groups have a kind of tone of being skeptical when we first stand up. And I feel like the sense I'm getting from the audience is, are you going to make me feel bad? And as we work through our presentation, you start to see this relief kind of start to ripple through the audience. And it's like, oh, a relief of you're not going to make me feel bad. And then when we get to the end and people share, we've set a good example of positivity so that people are sharing a variety of stories in a positive way. And it feels kind of magical there. But if I can just touch a moment on holding tension specifically, that I am a science teacher, and so this is kind of near and dear to my heart. I think of the tension that develops in a rope or a string when you pull on it from two ends. And if that happens to be a guitar string, that tension can be a source of beautiful music. And if it happens to be like a game of tug of war, there's no game unless people are pulling on both ends. And so one of the things that's been particularly hard for me in this work is to develop the same respect and compassion for my own views that I wish to communicate to others about their views, and that the conversation where we want to hold tension really doesn't work unless it's a two-way street. So for example, a person can talk to me about a view that I disagree with, and I can end by saying, wow, you've really given me something to think about. You really have a good point, and stop there. And then they've given me a lovely gift, and I have not reciprocated. I have not shared my view that they might disagree with and that might propel them into thinking about an idea a little bit differently. And so just being willing to do your end of the holding tension is a big part of it for me.
I think an important element of this racial justice work is that we aren't evangelists of the good news, that we are enlightened and we are sharing it with the people who need to be more like us. But in fact, we are building relationships with people, and part of relationships is that reciprocity, and that you can't form a relationship with people or communities and have it only be one way. If you yourself are closed off to receiving, I have learned so much about, I've lived in Portland my whole life, and, prior to this work, didn't do much traveling around Oregon, besides to Bend or the coast. And I've learned so much about this place that I call home by becoming in community with folks in Southern Oregon, Eastern Oregon, and it has enriched my life. Being a part of this reciprocal sharing of the values. I really appreciate the dedication to community that I see in small towns that I don't experience in the big city. One of my favorite things about Grants Pass is all of the yard signs during political seasons, how activated people are about the local library school board. And it's exciting that people are that invested in their community. And so I have learned more just by being open to that reciprocity, that I'm not here to evangelize about what it means to be a Sunrise community, but that I'm here to also learn in community with folks about what that Sunrise vision can be.
And as someone from the place, there's also a gift in hearing the perspective of someone from a different place, because it reminds me, oh yes, in political seasons, I can be thankful that we are involved and we are talking about this and we care about this, and that's a real strength. And how can we build on that? And how can we grow? And how can we increase our connections between the groups that are passionate and sharing? And so it's really fun to, there's such a depth that we get when we don't just connect with the people that are closest to us or right around us or just like us, and that we just miss out on. There's something that you've talked about, Dorothy, about, and maybe I can prompt you on it, about tension. And, well, I get you taught just how beautiful things come. I mean, you talked about that music, that we would miss out on that music. We'd miss out on this beautiful, fruitful thing if we didn't hold that tension and listen longer in the midst of that.
I think that talking about the community presentations, and the reciprocity, that being able to be there in these diverse groups of people, many of whom we have assumptions about each other. They assume things about us and we assume things about them. That sense of curiosity, that people will say, I had no idea that this was the truth. When I guess for me, I always thought, well, that's who they are. This is who Grants Pass is a sundown town. We've heard people say that. We didn't know that was true. And we've heard some just incredibly sad stories about, yes, it is true. But it's lent people the space to be themselves and talk about that. And it's also provided me, I've always been a protester. I've been a person who, anti-war, women's rights, all these things I've protested. And all of a sudden, I'm not protesting, I'm doing something for something that, like Taylor says, could change the end of the story, could make a new ending to the story. So it's all lovely. Our process is who we are.
I think in liberal/progressive spaces, there's often an espousement of inclusivity, but not a practice of true inclusivity. I live in the city, and I go to spaces where they advertise how inclusive it is and how everybody's at the table. And one thing that I've never heard anyone say is, well, did we invite someone from rural? Did we invite someone with a conservative background? And those two huge identities are often left out of our, quote, inclusive spaces. And that if, in liberal/progressive spaces, if we ourselves are exclusionary in who we want to be a part of our inclusivity, it isn't that much different than the Sundown Towns that we are trying to educate people on. If we still practice an element of exclusivity in who we consider part of our community, whose voice we consider value. And it's definitely been a learning experience for me that I try to bring into some of the city spaces about, we say we want these things, but we don't 100% practice it 100%. And I think that is what requires an element of humility in doing Grants Pass Remembrance, that even though this is something we care about, we ourselves can at times be blind to how we actually live out those ideals. And I think that carrying that spirit of humility has been really important for us.
There's a thing that's happened in me in engaging in this work with you all, where I've become increasingly aware of the groups or the people that, it's usually groups because they're too distant to be like individuals, that I want to be exclusive of. We've talked before on podcasts and shared stories of my working through the Salt Shakers, the group locally that has signs that they're Christians. That's part of why it's the hardest group for me, because I too am a Christian, but the way that they do things is really hard for me, and I want to just say, just go away, don't be here. And so it's been a really important process for me internally to engage with the people that I want to, like, just say go away and don't be here. And I feel like we all have those kinds of people, and I feel like this work has, it's not just that we're doing racial justice work and that we're seeking towards racial reconciliation. There's also this like reconciliation of myself to people and my neighbors that happens in me in the process of doing this work. And I've loved how interconnected it is. Like there's such a growth process that I've gotten to engage in being involved in this work. Like it has grown me in how I love others. It has grown me in what it really looks like to listen. It's grown me and challenged me in how I hold tension with people when we're talking, when I'm wanting to have conversations on racism and when I'm not, like it's just this, it's interconnected with all of life, and I love that.
I have 3 theories of change that I try to adhere to. The first is that I'm not in the business of changing everyone. Success is a function of realistic expectations. But secondly, we lose hope when we stop believing individuals and communities can change, so I choose to remain hopeful. And third, that just because you can't change the whole of something doesn't mean you can't change a part. We've been doing this work in Grants Pass for nearing 3 years now, and that doesn't mean we've rid Grants Pass of racism, but just before we hopped up on the stage, we were reading the Daily Courier's story about the upcoming Martin Luther King events that we're hosting this weekend. And to see these events celebrated and celebrating the fact that there's a Martin Luther King weekend happening in town is really encouraging, and that's a representation of some of the change that we've been able to help see grow in the community, and that gives me hope.
I'm reminded of a quote. I'm not going to quote it. I'm going to try to. Something about, the less you care about something or the less you're invested in something, yes, losing doesn't hurt as bad, but winning doesn't feel as good, right? And that's how I feel about our Martin Luther King event. I think last year's event, we were timid and we were worried and we thought no one would show up. And then 1 year later, we've got 3 days of events in town with different groups, with partnerships, with art and music and food. And it's so inspiring, because it would be easy to be less invested, be more cynical, and say, well, we knew it wasn't going to work out. We didn't have faith in Grants Pass, and look what happened, it didn't work. But instead, we've kept that hope alive, right? And we've continued to work for something that we don't know what it's going to look like, and that's okay. We don't have to always be in control. I'm saying that to myself. But look at what we've accomplished in this amount of time in this complicated space. It's incredible.
Listening to Taylor reminded me of a quote also that I'm going to try to get right, which is, because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. And if we all just did a little something, the world would change. And so I think of what you were talking about, Gabby, with interconnection. And I have really started to feel the interconnection of this work with everything I do in my life. I do a lot of environmental work, and the intersection between like climate justice and social justice has come just much more to the forefront of my mind for me. And I am starting to do my other activist work with more gentleness and joy and openness to who other people might be. And I think it's stronger because of that.
Which leads me to talk about our process. How we work together is similar. When we have meetings, it's a non-hierarchical. It's a kind of a structure that's called sociocracy, but we each talk, and everybody participates. So there's no one who sits back and thinks, oh God, they're talking again, or I wish I had, or the people who would never say a word. So we all participate. And the way that we deal with the community is the same way. That it's also that if you have something you can offer, we love having it. And if you don't, that's fine too. Be with us. So it's just such a lovely way to be in the world, and it makes me feel good that people feel that way about me, and it makes me feel good that I feel that way about everybody else too. Please participate. Tell me how you are. I'm learning that curiosity. So.
You mentioned earlier about how we're the benefactors of this work, and I just love that. It's so true that it fills us up to get to be involved in this way. It's not just a pouring out or a pushing or a making something happen. It's oh gosh, I feel better after that meeting. This is good.
That is a common thing. You were talking about maybe more progressive circles where it's like the work, do the work. And in 2020 especially, so many social media and just in general, people are saying, well, what are you doing? What are you doing to help the work? And it's such a hard concept to understand. But it doesn't feel like work. And I'm not going to define it for you right now either. But it's just such a different take on what work means. That's part of my skepticism at the beginning was, well, how do we do this? Where's our plan? Where's our structure? Where's our, 5-year goal? We never had any of that. But look what we've accomplished, And even last year we had 3 events in a row. At the first event, we didn't know the third was going to happen, and we pulled it together. So it doesn't have to be so structured, and I don't always know what I'm doing. I don't think all of you always know what you're doing, but meeting together, talking, listening to each other, and sharing everyone's ideas has created this beautiful Grants Pass Remembrance that we get to all be a part of.
Sometimes I think it's almost as simple as people learn through doing. And because people learn through doing, we actually are the biggest learners. And that's one of the reasons why we're really passionate about holding events in community, because not everyone can meet monthly via Zoom or more than once a month because we're planning events. But if someone gets to come to one of our events once every year, they're learning through doing just like us. And so it has been, and I think that's one of the things that we want to communicate to people who are going to take on this work, in succession after Grants Pass Remembrance, is that the doers, by practicing what it means to be a Sunrise community, you're actually going to be the biggest beneficiary. And I think that goes a little bit back to the humility, that it wasn't we have seen the mountaintop of what a Sunrise community looks like and we have come down to share it with everyone else. But it is we are going up the mountaintop ourselves, and we want to bring people along with us. And so I think that is really important for future communities to know when it comes to leading this work.
I'm finding myself really intrigued by this interaction between doing, and I have in my head this word being. And I remember in college reading a book by Eric Fromm, I think, on doing and being. I do not remember the title of the book, but I remember in reading that book, there was kind of the doing was, it was separate from your being. And there's something about the doing that we're partaking in that is so integral to our being that it doesn't, I don't get burnt out, because if, the events that we did last year, well, some of them were we can just do this. Okay, let's just do this. That's okay. We don't need to try to do something that's not us. And so it's this doing that not only comes out of our being, but also then feeds back and grows us in who we are, and it continues to feed us and fill us. And it's just something beautiful about that interaction.
It's not a contest. It's and there's an end, but there's not an end. And that's the thing. If we can be the kind of teach other communities how to do this work, but they won't do it the same. And we're not one-upping them. We're participating with them. I am not afraid to ask questions or to voice my opinion. And in many groups I am. But I like the way that we can be humble, like Taylor says, with humility, but leave a legacy and a roadmap for other communities.
It's been really a sweet thing to just start talking with Ashland and hearing what that will look like, and to see how it will look very different, because they're a very different community than us. They have a different story. They're in a different, but it's been so fun how it's not a competition, and I can still find myself. I have had seasons where I'm tempted to hear about something really cool going on and be like, oh no. And like, wait, what am I doing? Like, that's not what it's about. Like, how wonderful. I can celebrate and enjoy and be so thankful for what's going on. And I can celebrate and enjoy and be so thankful for what's going on. Like, it's not a competition, but it can be so easy for us to shift into that. It's a contest, it's a competition, there's space for us all.
And that's what's so nice, is that it's not performative either, right? I don't think any of us are here so that we can say, hey, we did the work, we're done. I'm going to go home and stop caring about Grants Pass, and because we can see the harm that is still happening. A lot of times it's, well, history was way back then, where there's no more sign on the bridge, there's no more racism. And we've heard stories upon stories of people in our community right now that are hurting or being hurt, people of color, because that is the legacy that Grants Pass has had. So it's so cool that we can be doing this and have a purpose and not be pretending, to be complete, because we know that it'll be a long time before it's complete.
One thing is, I think that reconciliation is more of a process and less of an endpoint. We understand that, when we talk about ourselves as individuals, we never say, well, oh, I'm a good person. Like, I achieved that last year, and now I'm just henceforth a good person. You would understand that, no, like, you got to sort of continue. It's this process of this ongoing, and I often get that. So, well, it's like, well, when are we a Sundown Town, or when are we a Sunrise community, and when can we be done? But instead, it's more, well, you are a Sunrise community by continually doing this work and knowing that it never stops. But not thinking of that as this unending challenge that you have to feel overwhelmed by, but instead it is knowing that, and as we talked about, it's a process, and you don't think of that unending challenge as daunting if you know what we've talked about before, of that you're actually the beneficiary. So in fact, you're never going to say, when can we just be a Sunrise community and be done? You're saying, oh, I actually am benefiting from this process that keeps going and going. And that's one thing that I think we're trying to learn how to convey to people, that the fact that this is never ending isn't actually a bad thing. It means the benefit will also never end, and that's something we're looking to share.
Just grows. Were you going to say something earlier, Dorothy?
I'll say something different now about that never-ending process. I think that a big part of that not feeling like a burden comes back to not thinking of it as the work, like Sylvia was saying, that it's something that is not one more thing to do in an already busy life. It is something that gets integrated into everything that I do. And that's a different style of community work than I've ever done before. And I think I've heard somebody use the phrase that in this work we're just bubbling with joy, and so that it is. I don't have to be consciously working on Grants Pass Remembrance, but when I bring that joy and that openness into every single interaction that I have in the community, I'm in a way doing the work, although I don't really like to use that phrase.
I think, once again, going back to the spouse metaphor, of you don't say, well, we got married and I proclaim my love for you, and there, I love you officially. Now I'm kind of done. But instead, you experience that love through the ongoing pouring and receiving, and you don't think of loving your spouse as an act of service, even though you do acts of service in the furtherance of that love. But in that same way, you love your community, and you don't I officially love Grants Pass, and now I can be done. But it is that continual thing, and just like loving your spouse, you receive. Part of that loving is something that affects you, and that's the same way that we have to love our community with something that changes us and benefits us through that process.
Well, as we look towards wrapping up this conversation, which I just love talking with you all and listening, what are some things that you want to make sure get said before we wrap it up? And we have time for each of us to say something if we'd like.
I'll lead off. I think since I'm trying to help other communities take on the Sunrise Project or something similar, it really is having to share with people this unconventional idea that we're not just trying to partner with people who are like us. We're not trying to find all the anti-racism groups or all the DEI groups and be like, all right, together we'll make a Sunrise community. But instead, it is finding everybody. The we means everyone, and that we need to be. And you're strategic. You're like, who is at the table? Who do we need to invite? And that it is recognition that this work is hard. It's a lot easier said than done to go cross-culturally across political or cultural or social divides. But that difficulty is part of doing the work. That's why we're some of the biggest recipients, those who are practicing. And that this unconventional approach will bear the fruits. And that it is, so I did some work in the community of Coos Bay, Oregon, before I worked in Grants Pass. And we had a historical marker unveiling for a man named Alonzo Tucker, Oregon's most widely documented African-American victim of lynching. And one of the things from the unveiling ceremony that I appreciated the most was who was present at the event. It wasn't just the groups who were really active during the Black Lives Matter protests, but in fact, we had those same activists standing side by side with the conservative city officials who were originally hesitant to wanting to do this work. And one of the important things about not just getting with like groups is sometimes the people who are initially resistant will become your biggest champions. And so the people at the historical marker unveiling who had the most positive things to say about it were the people who were originally hesitant. And that if we only get together with like-minded individuals, we lose out on that opportunity to create champions for justice throughout the community. And so I hope that future communities know that there is a benefit towards creating a table and holding space for everyone, because you will be surprised at who can be a champion for you in this cause.
I'm having a really fun moment of thinking through how hesitation can be a real gift in a conversation. That when someone is hesitant, that might actually mean that they really care, and that really caring they might not understand or know what you're interested or not sure what you're trying to say, but there's that just makes me think of, like, gosh, the next time I run into someone that's hesitant, I want to have a real respect for that hesitation, and not an impatience. You know, that respect for that very thing that might be hard for me. That I'm really glad that you're hesitant. Yeah.
One thing that I believe in is that if you want to learn something about kindness, find either someone who extended a great degree of kindness or received a great degree of kindness. If you want to know something about, being a good father, talk to someone who does the things that being a good father is, or find someone who once wasn't, but has learned to become a good father. And if you want to learn what an inclusive community can be, yes, you can go to the place that has all the very public signs about how inclusive and welcoming they are. But you can also learn about what it means to be a welcoming community by going to a place that was once exclusionary. And because they were once exclusionary, they really understand what it means to be truly inclusive. And that's what I hope Grants Pass can be, that because of the history, there's actually a deeper learning that can be unearthed from that community because of their history.
A Brian Stevenson quote has come to my head. He should be here with us right now. But we are all more than the worst thing we've ever done, and that includes Grants Pass, right? We can't just say, well, I'm more than the worst thing I've ever done, but you're not. It has to be everyone. And so we talk about the broken and the beautiful. We're not going back to our Sundown Town roots and saying, boy, let's sit in this and think about this and feel ashamed and hate our town, right? But we need to know about it. We need to unearth it, and then we can move forward. Like you were talking about the wound. It's still there. We see it. We hear about it. And, trying to heal it helps everyone. Because, like in our presentations, we've had people stand up and cry because they had an experience or they witnessed some instance of racism and they haven't had a space to talk about it because we don't usually talk about it. Where are those spaces? And that's what we're creating. So I'll just say it again, that I love this work, this fun, and I'm so grateful to be in community with all of you and all of Grants Pass.
Well, I love that Brian Stevenson quote about we're all more than the worst thing that we've ever done. I also found a counterpart to that in his book, which is that we're all more than the worst thing that has ever happened to us. And so people who are wounded are not only victims. And people who have excluded others are not only excluders. But you asked for kind of final thoughts, and one of my closing thoughts has to do with the fact that when I talk to neighbors about this, one of the questions I usually get is, well, this all sounds great, but what can I do? And what do we do with this once we hear about it? And I've been thinking about how so much of it rests on making a decision. That we can make a decision to like somebody that we don't like yet. We can make a decision to listen longer and hold tension in conversation. And these decisions lead to practices. And then these practices lead to habits. And then these habits can serve as examples to somebody else who might want to make a similar decision. And this one person at a time really seems to be how community transformation can happen.
Yeah, I think Taylor's story about Coos Bay is just amazing, that some of the most radical hesitators were the most radical acceptors, and that's my what I'm hoping is that we're not sanctimonious, but we do know what justice is, and we have a vision of a sunrise community, but we don't know what it's going to be because it takes everybody, and I think we all believe that you have to go through the remembrance, repair, and reconciliation, that we have to admit what happened. And then that's not who we are. It doesn't mean we're stuck there. And so it's a process, and it's moving, and that's what I see, and that's what I hope. And I hope someday when someone calls me to make a reservation at my motel and asks if it's safe for somebody of color, I can say yes about Grants Pass. And I mostly do, but sometimes I hesitate. And I'm sad that I even get the question. I hope someday I won't get the question.
I hope one day someone calls the motel and says, I want to come to Grants Pass because I heard about the Sunrise Project and I heard about a welcoming community, and that's a place I want to be.
Yes. Yes. One of the pieces that you were talking about that remembrance and how freeing it is. Like, fear does come into this picture, but remembering and seeing that brokenness and saying, that was there, and what does it look like today? And I've got to listen into my neighbors that are experiencing this, because it's not going to be me. And so how can I listen? It's such a freeing process, but we can easily forget that we're not going to be buried in guilt and shame. We can feel like that might be what happens, but there's such beauty in this, and it's just been a joy to get to unearth some of that together today. Yeah, thank you so much.